At 084:07 hours on December 23, 1944, Private First Class Eugene Morrison crouched in a frozen foxhole on the northern perimeter of Bastogne, watching 4 German Tiger tanks roll toward his position through morning fog. Frost crystals had formed on his M1 Garand's receiver. The metal burned cold against his gloved hand. Diesel exhaust mixed with pine scent in the heavy air. Through the frozen earth beneath him, Morrison felt rhythmic tremors, 56 tons times 4, advancing at 3 miles per hour through snow-covered forest. The fog was thick, grey-white, reducing visibility to 80 yards. Beyond that curtain, the Tigers were shadows becoming substance. The radio crackled. Captain Drummond's voice cut through static. All units, fall back to secondary positions, acknowledge. 16 voices responded in sequence. Wilco. Roger that. Falling back. Copy, moving now. Morrison keyed his mic. Copy. Falling back. But he didn't move. He checked his equipment with methodical precision. M1, Garand. 8 rounds chambered, 56 more in the bandolier across his chest. 2 M26 fragmentation grenades secured to his belt. Wristwatch, 0847 hours exactly. He looked toward the advancing Tigers. Distance, 580 yards. Closing steadily. Behind him, 180 men pulled back to the tree line 200 yards south. He watched them go shadows, moving through fog, rifles at the ready, boots crunching through snow. Within 2 minutes, Morrison's foxhole stood 60 yards ahead of the new American defensive line. Alone, isolated. The last obstacle between 4 Tiger tanks and a breakthrough that would kill everyone in Bastogne. The situation was simple mathematics, and the numbers told a nightmare story. This was day 6 of the siege. The 101st Airborne 10,000 men surrounded by 45,000 German troops. 5-1 numerical superiority. The past 5 days had cost 341 American casualties. Medical supplies were exhausted. Ammunition stocks had dropped to 40%. And the northern sector, Morrison's sector, had 0 anti-tank weapons. The Tigers approaching through that fog were nightmares made of steel. Morrison knew the specifications by heart. Every soldier in Bastogne did. You learned them the way you learned prayers, because your life depended on understanding what you faced. Tiger 1, heavy tank. Weight, 56 tons. Main armament, 88 mm, KWK, 36 liters, 56 cannon. Effective range, 2,000 yards against armored targets. At that distance, the 88 mm could punch through any American tank ever built. Frontal armor, 100 mm 4 inches of hardened steel, impervious to every weapon the 101st Airborne possessed. Side armor, 80 mm. Rear armor, 82 mm. Crew complement, 5 men, commander, gunner, loader, driver, radio operator. Maximum speed, 24 miles per hour on roads, 12 cross-country. In snow and forest like this, 3 to 4 miles per hour. American anti-tank capability at Bastogne had been measured and found catastrophically wanting. On December 16th, when the siege began, the division had possessed 12 M9A1 bazookas. By December 23rd, 3 bazookas remained, with 14 rockets total. All 3 had been positioned on the eastern perimeter, defending the main road where German armor was expected to concentrate. Bazooka effectiveness against Tiger frontal armor, 0%. Even against side armor, success rate was maybe 15%, and only if you hit tracks or road wheels at ranges under 50 yards. The northern sector, Morrison's sector, had no anti-tank weapons at all. The mathematical reality was brutal and precise. 4 Tigers could traverse the 800-yard northern sector in 22 minutes. They didn't need to engage each foxhole individually. They could simply drive through the American line, crush defensive positions under their treads, and roll directly into Bastogne's town center. 180 American soldiers with rifles could not stop them. Rifle fire. 30-06 Springfield could not penetrate Tiger armor at any range. Standard doctrine was explicit. Withdraw when facing armor without anti-tank support. Preserve your forces. Establish new defensive lines. Live to fight another day. But Morrison's position was the last obstacle. If those Tigers broke through here, they'd reach Bastogne within 30 minutes. Estimated additional casualties: 400 men. Civilians trapped in town: 3,000. The math was simple. Withdrawal meant death for everyone behind him. Morrison looked at the Tigers again. 520 yards now, closer, inevitable. He looked down at his boots. Standard issue, worn from 2 weeks of continuous combat. The leather was cracked, the laces were frozen stiff, not built for what he was considering. He remembered Pennsylvania, summer 1941, state track and field championship, the 40-yard dash, starting blocks, crowd noise, the starter's pistol crack, first 3 steps explosive power, next 10 steps acceleration. Final push to maximum speed. His time, 5.2 seconds. State record. The medal they'd given him was still in a drawer back home in Harrisburg. Morrison spoke aloud, voice barely above a whisper. Track and field. Let's see if it counts for something. The Tigers were at 500 yards. The fog was thinning slightly. He could see details now: the commander's cupola on the lead tank, the long barrel of the 88mm gun, exhaust smoke trailing grey against white snow, 4 machines, 20 German crew. Advancing on 180 Americans who had nothing that could stop them. Except one private who'd run track in high school and understood that sometimes 5.2 seconds was the difference between living and dying. Sometimes 40 yards was the distance between surrender and survival. Sometimes one man staying in a frozen foxhole when everyone else retreated was the only thing standing between catastrophe and hope. Morrison checked his rifle one more time, cycled the action. Smooth. Cold, but smooth. The Tigers kept coming. And Morrison stayed exactly where he was. The trouble started at 0023 hours, 40 miles, and over the Normandy coast. Donovan sat in the C-47 transport with 17 other paratroopers. The aircraft shook, metal groaned. 18 men packed into a fuselage designed for cargo. Equipment checks completed 10 minutes ago. Parachutes rigged, weapons secured, static lines hooked to the overhead cable. Nothing left to do except wait for the green light and try not to think about what waited below. The nervous energy was tangible. Some men checked their gear for the 5th time, others stared at nothing. A few prayed. One kid from Ohio kept tapping his rifle stock in rhythm. Tap, 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 like a heartbeat. Then the anti-aircraft fire started. Tracers rose from the darkness below. Orange streaks climbing toward them, beautiful and terrible. Flak burst at 1,500 feet, black flowers blooming in the night sky. The C-47 lurched, pilots taking evasive action, banking hard. The aircraft wasn't supposed to do that during jump sequence, but staying level meant dying. The green light flashed, early. The jump master screamed, "Go! Go! Go!" Donovan was 4th in line. The door showed nothing but darkness and tracer fire. The man ahead of him jumped, then the next. Then Donovan was in the door. He didn't think, couldn't think, just stepped into 800 feet of empty air. The parachute opened hard, risers jerking his shoulders. Then he was floating, silent, the aircraft engines fading. He could see other parachutes scattered across the sky. Too scattered. The formation was wrong. Men spread over miles instead of concentrated. The anti-aircraft fire had disrupted everything. The ground rushed up. Donovan saw hedgerows. Ancient Norman field boundaries. 8-foot walls of earth and thorns dividing the countryside into tiny fortresses. He was coming down fast, aimed for a field. Missed. Hit the hedgerow directly. Impact drove the air from his lungs. Thorns tore his uniform. The SCR-300 radio strapped to his leg ripped free, 30 pounds of equipment tumbling into darkness. Donovan heard it hit the ground below. Heard something crack. He cut his parachute, dropped 8 feet into the field, found his weapon, found the radio, pulled out his red lens flashlight and examined the damage. The receiver housing had cracked, battery connection loose. He tightened it, tested the transmitter. Lights functional. Tested the receiver. Nothing. Static. Dead. One-way communication. He could send messages, couldn't hear responses, couldn't confirm anyone received his transmissions. The problem wasn't just technical, it was tactical. Military radio protocol required two-way confirmation. Send message, receive acknowledgement, verify authentication. Without a working receiver, he was broadcasting into a void. The first hour after landing was chaos. Cricket clickers in the darkness, 2 clicks challenge, 1 click response. Donovan found 3 other paratroopers. None from his unit. Corporal James Webb from Boston. 2 privates who'd lost their squads. They moved northeast toward what they hoped was the rally point. By 0045 hours, patterns started emerging from the radio traffic. Donovan couldn't fully hear but could piece together from partial transmissions. The Germans were running psychological operations. At 0052 hours, Captain Morrison's platoon received orders over the radio. 40 men. The transmission directed them to a specific assembly point. Perfect American accent, correct call signs, proper authentication responses. Morrison followed the orders, led his platoon to the coordinates. German machine guns opened fire from 3 sides. 22 Americans fell in the first 3 minutes. The survivors scattered. Morrison made it out. Barely. His after-action report came over the radio net. Voice shaking. Authentication seemed correct. Voice was American. We trusted it. At 0118 hours, Lieutenant Harris received a retreat order. German armor approaching his position. Fall back to alternate coordinates. The voice on the radio sounded command authority, used proper terminology. Harris questioned it, asked for authentication challenge. The response gave the correct code from the codebook. Harris complied. Moved 35 men to the safe position. German mortars had the coordinates pre-registered. 15 Americans died, 12 wounded, the rest scattered into the Norman countryside. The pattern became clear. The Germans had captured American radios from earlier operations, had English speakers, German Americans who'd emigrated before the war. Intelligence officers who'd studied at American universities, they knew the procedures, knew the authentication codes, could fake everything. American units responded by questioning every transmission, demanding multiple verifications, triple-checking authentication, better safe than dead. But careful verification required time, 8 to 12 minutes per message. And time was something scattered paratroopers didn't have. Donovan monitored the radio traffic, heard American commanders hesitating, heard units requesting confirmation of orders they should have executed immediately, heard the paralysis. Fear of German deception was causing fatal delays. The authentication system designed to protect Americans was now being weaponized against them. 2 days earlier, the system had seemed perfect. June 4th, 1944. Briefing room in England. Maps covering every wall. Intelligence officers presenting. German positions marked with red symbols. Defensive works. Infantry companies. Artillery batteries. All documented. All plotted. The crossroads near Sainte-Mère-Église showed clear. Designated objective Baker. Primary rally point for the 82nd Airborne. 3 regiments would drop dispersed across the countryside, then converge at the crossroads, establish a defensive strong point, control the roads, prevent German reinforcement toward the invasion beaches. Expected enemy resistance, 1 German infantry company, approximately 150 men. Light weapons. No armor within 12 miles. The nearest panzer division was positioned near Caen. Intelligence was certain. Colonel James Gavin explained the plan. Systematic, detailed, every phase coordinated, radio communication critical. Donovan's role. Maintain contact during assembly. Coordinate company movements. Ensure units converged properly. The briefing room radiated confidence. Officers nodded. Plans made sense. Intelligence was solid. Aerial reconnaissance photos showed exactly what they'd face. What nobody knew, the photos were 36 hours old. On June 5th, German command made a decision. The 91st Infantry Division repositioned toward the coast. 2 panzer companies attached for mobile defense. Their mission, stop airborne infiltration before it could consolidate. The German commander chose defensive positions carefully. Key crossroads, natural rally points. Places Americans would logically try to concentrate. One of those crossroads, Objective Baker. By midnight June 5th, German armor sat exactly where American paratroopers planned to assemble. Perfect ambush. Prepared positions. Interlocking fields of fire. They just had to wait for Americans to gather. Intelligence never saw it. The reconnaissance flights had already flown. The photos already analyzed. The briefings already delivered. Nobody knew the enemy had moved. Now 1,200 American paratroopers were following a plan based on information that was accurate 48 hours ago but catastrophically wrong now. At 0132 hours, Donovan discovered the truth. He and Webb were moving through hedgerows, searching for their unit, heard engine noise, diesel, heavy, not the sound of trucks, the sound of tanks. They moved cautiously toward it. 200 yards. 100. The crossroads came into view. Moonlight revealed everything. 2 Panzer IV tanks, hull-down positions. 3 SDKFEDs 251 half-tracks. Infantry dug in around the crossroads. Donovan counted systematically. 80 visible. Probably more in positions he couldn't see. Machine gun nests, mortar crews. This was prepared defense, Webb whispered. That's where we're supposed to assemble. Donovan pulled out his map. Checked by red lens flashlight. The crossroads matched Objective Baker perfectly. The primary rally point, where 3 regiments were supposed to converge. The radio crackled. Colonel Gavin's voice. All companies converge on Objective Baker. ETA 20 minutes. Donovan checked his watch. 0133 hours. 20 minutes meant 0153 hours. But lead elements were already close. He could hear them. Equipment rattling. Men moving through brush maybe 500 yards south. They wouldn't wait for the main body. They'd arrive in minutes. He had 19 minutes on paper, 90 seconds in reality. 1,200 men walking into German guns. Morrison's hands moved with mechanical precision. He pulled off his overcoat and dropped it in the foxhole. The heavy wool had kept him warm for 5 days, but it would slow him down now. Restrict arm movement, cost him, fractions of seconds he couldn't afford to lose. He kept his wool uniform and gloves. He'd need grip on frozen metal. He triple-knotted his bootlaces. Couldn't risk them coming loose during the sprint. Secured both grenades to his belt with extra wire stripped from damaged field telephone cable. The grenades couldn't shift, couldn't bounce, couldn't fall during movement. He cycled the M1 Garand's action 3 times. Smooth. The cold hadn't frozen the mechanism. Loaded a fresh 8-round clip with a metallic ping. 56 rounds in the bandolier across his chest. Enough for what he planned. Maybe. Morrison removed his helmet. 2.5 pounds saved. More importantly, better peripheral vision without the steel rim blocking his sight lines. He needed to see everything. The Tigers were at 400 yards now, close enough to see details. The lead tank's commander cupola. The long 88mm barrel. Exhaust smoke trailing from engine grills. Track assemblies churning through snow, throwing a white powder in their wake. Morrison closed his eyes. Remembered. Pennsylvania, 1941. State championship. Starting blocks cold against his fingertips. Crowd noise like ocean waves. The starter raising his pistol. Morrison's breathing controlled, rhythmic. His coach's voice in his ear. First 3 steps, explosive power. Don't think about the finish line. Think about the next step. The pistol crack. Morrison's legs driving, cleats biting track. First step explosive, second step lengthening stride, third step full power, then acceleration 10 steps of pure speed building, then maximum velocity, everything he had, holding nothing back, 5.2 seconds, 40 yards, state record. Morrison opened his eyes. The Tigers were at 300 yards. He analyzed what he faced. Tiger 1 gun depression, 8 degrees below horizontal. Simple trigonometry. At 10 feet from the hull, the main gun physically could not depress enough to target him. The geometry created a dead zone. Get inside that, the zone, and the 88mm became useless. Commander's vision when buttoned up, 3 periscopes maximum. Thick glass blocks, 3 inches of reinforced material, giving maybe 30 degrees forward view and 15 degrees peripheral on each side. Total field of view, 60 degrees out of 360. That meant 300 degrees of blind spots. If Morrison approached from the right angle, the commander wouldn't see him until too late. The hull machine gun MG-34 mounted in the glacis plate had a 15-degree traverse arc left and right. 10 degrees depression, 20 degrees elevation. It couldn't cover the area directly beside the turret. Another blind spot. Morrison's plan crystallized. Sprint to the tank before the crew could react. Climb onto the hull using track guards as handholds. Blind the tank by destroying periscopes with rifle fire. Force the commander to open his hatch for visibility. When the hatch opened, drop a grenade inside. Simple. Insane. Possibly suicidal. But the numbers worked. If Morrison could run 40 yards in 5.2 seconds, and the Tiger was moving at 3 miles per hour, that's 4.4 feet per second. The tank would advance 22 feet while Morrison covered 120 feet. Closing speed differential meant Morrison would reach the tank before the turret could traverse to track him. The Tigers were at 200 yards. Morrison could hear them now. Diesel engines growling, metal squealing. The sound of 56 tons crushing frozen earth, 4 machines, 20 German crew, every one of them trained, experienced, confident that nothing could touch them. 100 yards. Morrison's breathing slowed, heart rate elevated but controlled, muscles coiled. He'd run track in snow before, during winter training. Snow added resistance, shortened stride length, reduced speed by maybe 10%. That meant his 5.2-second sprint might take closer to 6 seconds. Still fast enough. Had to be fast enough. 50 yards. Morrison could see the lead tank commander's vision blocks now. Small rectangular glass ports in the cupola. That's what he'd target first. Shatter the glass, blind the tank, force a decision. 45 yards. Optimal range. Any closer and he'd be in the tank's peripheral vision even through limited periscopes. Any farther and the sprint took too long, gave the crew too much reaction time. Morrison exploded from the foxhole. First 3 steps. Explosive power. Exactly like Coach taught him. Snow sprayed from his boots, legs driving, arms pumping. The M1 Garand clutched across his chest. Inside the lead Tiger, the commander saw movement through his periscope. A grey shape emerging from a foxhole. Infantry. Alone. Running directly at the tank. The commander's voice barked in German. Infanterie, links, infantry. Left, the gunner's hands moved to the turret traverse controls. Electric motors whined. The turret began rotating left. 15 degrees per second traverse speed. Need 30 degrees to track the target. 2 seconds to complete. Morrison covered 15 yards in 2.1 seconds. The turret was still turning. Morrison didn't run straight at the tank. He ran at a 45-degree angle toward the track assembly. Forced the turret to continue traversing, bought himself additional fractions of seconds. Every fraction mattered. Inside the Tiger. Soll ich stoppen? Should I stop? Nein, weiterfahren. No, keep moving. The driver kept the tank rolling forward. 3 miles per hour. Standard doctrine. Never stop when infantry attacks. Moving tank harder to assault than stationary target. Morrison hit his acceleration phase. Steps 10 through 15. Maximum speed building. The tank growing larger in his vision. 30 yards. 25 yards. 20 yards. His lungs burned, cold air like knives in his chest, legs screaming, but muscle memory took over. This was what his body knew. This was what he'd trained for, even if he'd never imagined training for this. 15 yards. The turret traverse was nearly complete. The 88mm gun swinging toward Morrison's approach vector. But the gun couldn't depress enough. Not at this range, not at this angle. 10 yards. Morrison could see details now, rivets in the armor plate, mud frozen to the track assembly. The commander's periscope, a small glass block protruding from the cupola. 5 yards. The hull machine gunner opened fire. MG-34 chattering. Rounds kicked up snow 3 feet to Morrison's right. The gunner was leading the target, trying to anticipate Morrison's path. But Morrison was weaving slightly, instinctively varying his stride. The rounds missed. 2 yards. Morrison's left hand reached out, fingers closing on the track guard, a metal strip running along the tank's side. Cold metal, even through the glove. His right boot found purchase on a track link. The track was moving, rolling forward, but Morrison timed it perfectly. He pulled himself up onto the hull. Total sprint time, 5.4 seconds. 0.2 of a second slower than his high school record. Fast enough. Morrison was on top of a 56-ton Tiger tank moving at 3 miles per hour through a Belgian forest. The commander's periscope was 6 inches from his right hand. Inside, 5 German crew were shouting, confused, trying to understand how an American infantryman had just climbed onto their tank. Morrison braced himself against the turret, brought the M1 Garand up one-handed, aimed at the periscope, and fired. The 30-06 round shattered the 3-inch glass block. Fragments sprayed into the tank's interior. The commander screamed. Morrison fired again. The driver's vision block exploded, fired a 3rd time. Another periscope gone. The Tiger was blind, and Morrison still had 53 rounds and 1 grenade left. The Tiger lurched beneath Morrison's boots. The driver, blind without vision blocks, yanked the control levers left. The 56-ton machine veered sharply. Morrison grabbed the engine deck grating with both hands, held on while the tank tried to shake him off like a dog shaking water. Inside the tank, voices screamed in German. Ich kann nichts sehen. I cannot see. Ist auf dem Panzer. He's on the tank. Schütteln Sie ihn ab. Shake him off. The tank accelerated. 4 miles per hour now, crashing through underbrush. A low pine branch swept toward Morrison's head. He ducked flat against the engine deck. The branch scraped across his back, tore his wool uniform, kept going. Morrison held on. The commander made his decision. Better to fight than cook inside a blind tank. The cupola hatch cracked open 3 inches, just enough for the commander to see out, just enough to assess the threat. Morrison was ready. He'd counted on this. Dropped the M1 Garand, let it clatter on the engine deck, grabbed the grenade from his belt, pulled the pin. The M26 fragmentation grenade had a 4 to 5 second fuse. Morrison didn't wait. He shoved the grenade toward the opening hatch. The commander saw it, saw the grenade-listed object tumbling toward him. His eyes went wide. He tried to slam the hatch closed, but Morrison wedged the grenade into the 3-inch gap. The hatch caught on the grenade's body, couldn't close completely. Morrison rolled off the tank, landed in snow. His legs absorbed the impact, muscles already screaming from the sprint. He forced himself up. Ran. 20 yards in 2.8 seconds. Every step agony, legs burning like they were on fire. Behind him, the grenade fell through the gap into the Tiger's crew compartment. The commander had 1 second to understand he was dead. The loader tried to grab the grenade, throw it back out. The gunner covered his head. The driver kept driving, still blind, unaware. The grenade detonated. Inside the sealed armor box, the explosion had nowhere to go. Overpressure turned the interior into a killing chamber. All 5 crew members died instantly. The hatches blew open from internal pressure. Smoke and flame vented through every opening. The tank rolled forward another 30 feet on momentum, then the dead driver's hands slipped from the controls. The Tiger veered left, crashed into an oak tree, and stopped. One Tiger destroyed. Time elapsed. 47 seconds from Morrison's foxhole to burning wreck. 3 Tigers remained, 150 yards behind the lead tank. Their commanders had watched everything through their periscopes. Watched one American soldier sprint to a Tiger, climb it, blind it, destroy it. Watched the impossible happen. Radio traffic crackled between the remaining tanks. Klaus ist tot. Klaus is dead. Ein einzelner Soldat. A single soldier. Wie ist das möglich? How is this possible? The second Tiger's commander, Oberfeldwebel Kurt Meyer, veteran of 2 years Eastern Front combat, made his assessment. The American had used the fog, had gotten close while vision was limited, had exploited the gun depression angle, stayed in the dead zone where weapons couldn't target him. Meyer's orders were precise. Panzer halt. Luken geschlossen. Warten auf Infanterie. Tank stop. Hatches sealed. Wait for infantry. But the fog prevented infantry in movement. The supporting grenadiers were 400 yards north, unable to see the tanks, unable to coordinate in 80-yard visibility. The Tigers were alone. Exactly the vulnerability Morrison had identified. Morrison crouched in the snow 40 yards from the burning first Tiger. His entire body shook, adrenaline crash hitting hard, muscles in his legs cramping, hands trembling so badly he could barely hold his rifle. He picked up the M1 Garand where he'd dropped it. No, wait. The rifle was still on the first Tiger's engine deck. He'd left it there when he rolled off. Morrison looked at his hands, empty except for one remaining grenade on his belt. He had no rifle, no primary weapon. 56 rounds of ammunition in his bandolier were useless without the M1 to fire them. Morrison forced his breathing to slow, forced his mind to work through the problem. 3 Tigers remaining. 1 grenade, no rifle. The mission wasn't finished. Those tanks would reorganize, would push forward, would break through and kill everyone in Bastogne. He looked at the 3 Tigers. They'd stopped advancing, formed a defensive semicircle 140 yards away, hatches sealed, waiting. Morrison made his calculation. They were afraid now, cautious. That caution was a weapon he could use. But he needed a different approach for the second tank. Couldn't repeat the same tactic. The German commanders had learned from watching the first Tiger die. He moved through the forest, using trees for concealment, flanking movement, 60 yards at an angle. His legs protested every step, cramping muscles, screaming. He ignored the pain. Pain meant he was alive. Pain meant he could still move. The second Tiger sat at the western point of the defensive formation. Commanders' periscopes oriented toward where Morrison had last been seen near the burning first Tiger. They expected him to attack from that direction again. Expected him to sprint from the foxhole area. Morrison circled wide. Came at the second Tiger from 90 degrees off their expectation. Used the fog and the burning wreckage as concealment. Got within 45 yards of the Tiger's right flank before stopping behind a thick pine. The Tiger crew had no idea he was there. Their periscopes pointed the wrong direction. Their attention focused on the wrong sector. Morrison looked at his empty hands, looked at the 1 grenade, looked at the Tiger's engine deck, the grilled air intake visible even from this angle. He didn't have a rifle to blind this tank, couldn't force the crew to open hatches, had to use a different method. If he could get on the engine deck, if he could drop the grenade directly into the engine compartment through the air intake. Fuel lines, ammunition storage, everything flammable concentrated in that space. 1 grenade in the engine would cook the whole tank from inside. But it meant another sprint. 45 yards this time. Longer distance, legs already exhausted. And the third Tiger, positioned 100 yards west, would see him the moment he broke from cover. Morrison watched the third Tiger, its hull machine gun pointed southeast. The gunner's attention focused on the area around the first burning Tiger, waiting for Morrison to appear from that direction. If Morrison sprinted now, from the east, The machine gunner would need 2 to 3 seconds to traverse the gun, 90 degrees to track the new threat. In 2 to 3 seconds, Morrison could cover maybe 60 feet. That left 40 feet exposed to machine gun fire, MG-42, 1,200 rounds per minute, 20 rounds per second. 40 feet of lethal space where Morrison would be a target with nowhere to hide. His legs were already cramping. His sprint time would be slower than the first attack, maybe 6 seconds instead of 5.4, maybe longer. Morrison looked at the second Tiger, looked at the killing ground he'd have to cross, looked at the third Tiger's machine gun. 45 yards, 6 seconds, 20 rounds per second trying to kill him. He thought about track and field, thought about his coach's voice. Don't think about the finish line. Think about the next step. Morrison burst from cover. The machine gunner on the third Tiger saw movement, traverse left. The MG-42 swung toward the sprinting American, opened fire. Tracers walked through the snow 3 feet behind Morrison's boots. The gunner was leading the target, but Morrison's path was irregular, weaving slightly through trees. 20 yards covered, legs screaming, lungs burning, 30 yards. Machine gun rounds impacting closer now, 40 yards. The second Tiger's engine deck right there. Morrison launched himself at the track assembly, grabbed metal, pulled. His exhausted legs barely managed to climb. He rolled onto the engine deck just as a burst of machine gun fire stitched across the space where he'd been standing 1 second earlier. He was on top of the second Tiger. The crew inside still hadn't located him. Their periscopes pointed the wrong way. Morrison found the engine air intake. 12-inch grill. Perfect. He pulled the pin on his last grenade, dropped it through the grill directly into the engine compartment. Rolled off the tank, hit the ground. His legs gave out completely, collapsed in the snow, couldn't get up, couldn't run, nothing left. The grenade detonated inside the Tiger's engine. Fuel lines ruptured. Fire spread instantly. The crew had maybe 3 seconds before the ammunition cooked off. Hatches flew open. 5 Germans bailed out in panic. Morrison lay in the snow 25 yards away, watching. He had no weapon, couldn't move, could only watch as the second Tiger burned. 2 Tigers destroyed, 2 remaining. And Morrison's body had nothing left to give. The second Tiger's crew scrambled from their hatches like ants from a burning nest. 5 men in winter grey uniforms, boots hitting snow, running from the tank that was about to explode. The commander emerged first, Luger pistol in hand, then gunner, the loader, the driver, face blackened with soot, the radio operator last. Morrison lay in the snow 25 yards away. His M1 Garand was gone, left on the first Tiger. His grenades were gone, both used. His legs had stopped responding to commands. Muscle failure, complete and total. He couldn't stand, couldn't run, could barely move. The German commander spotted him, raised the Luger, shouted something Morrison didn't understand. Then Sergeant William Hayes emerged from the tree line with 3 other Americans from the secondary defensive line. Hayes fired his M1 twice. The German commander went down. The gunner raised his hands. Nicht schießen! Don't shoot! The other 3 Germans dropped their weapons, hands high, surrender immediate. Hayes reached Morrison in 4 seconds. Morrison! You hit? Morrison shook his head. Couldn't speak yet, breathing too hard. Hayes grabbed him under the shoulders, dragged him back toward the tree line. 2 other soldiers, Private Chen and Private Bailey, kept rifles on the surrendering Germans. Behind them, the second Tiger's ammunition cooked off. The explosion split the turret open like a tin can. Flames vented 50 feet into the grey sky. Burning diesel smoke mixed with fog. 2 Tigers destroyed. 3 Germans captured. 2 escaped into the forest. 2 Tigers remained. Morrison sat with his back against an oak tree, Hayes pouring water from a canteen into his mouth. Morrison coughed, swallowed, managed words. The other 2. Where? Hayes pointed. Western position, 120 yards. They're not advancing, just sitting there. Morrison forced himself to look. Through the fog, he could see the dark shapes. 2 tigers in defensive positions, hatches sealed, not moving. The 3rd tiger had watched Morrison destroy 2 tanks in less than 6 minutes. Their commanders were reassessing, trying to understand how to counter a threat they'd never trained for. Morrison tried to stand. His legs buckled. Hayes caught him. "Easy. You're done, kid. You did enough." "Not done." Morrison's voice was raw. "They push forward, they break through. We've got the line reinforced. We'll hold." Morrison shook his head. "You don't have anti-tank weapons. They'll roll right through." Hayes didn't argue because Morrison was right. Rifles couldn't stop tigers. The Americans could shoot at those tanks all day and accomplish nothing except wasting ammunition. Morrison watched the 3rd tiger. It was moving now, not advancing toward the American line. Reversing, backing away from the engagement zone. "They're retreating," Hayes said. But Morrison saw the geometry. The tiger was reversing toward a gap between 2 large oak trees, 60 yards west. The gap was the only path through that section of forest. The tank had to navigate through those trees to complete its withdrawal. And Morrison knew every tree in this sector. 5 days of observation. He knew where that tiger was going and where it had to slow down. "Help me up," Morrison said. "You can't even stand. Help me up." Hayes pulled him to his feet. Morrison's legs shook but held. Barely. He took 1 step, then another. Walking like a drunk, legs refusing to cooperate properly, but moving. "Where are you going?" Morrison didn't answer. He moved through the forest at an angle. Not straight toward the 3rd tiger, toward where it would be in 40 seconds. The oak tree gap, the choke point. His legs were dead weight. Each step required conscious effort. His sprint speed was gone. If he tried to run now, he'd fall on his face. But he could walk, could navigate, could think. The 3rd tiger reversed at 8 miles per hour. In 40 seconds it would reach the gap. Would have to slow to 2 miles per hour to navigate between the oaks without damaging its tracks. Morrison covered 60 yards in those 40 seconds. Shambling walk, 1 step at a time, using trees for support. Reached the eastern oak just as the tiger approached the gap. The tank slowed exactly as Morrison predicted. 2 miles per hour. The commander focused on navigation, watching through periscopes to avoid collision with the massive oaks. The gap was 14 feet wide. The tiger was 12 feet, 4 inches wide, 9.8 inches clearance on each side, required careful maneuvering. Morrison waited behind the eastern oak. The tiger entered the gap. Track assemblies 3 inches from tree trunks, engine noise filling the forest, diesel smoke choking thick. Morrison stepped out from cover, 8 feet from the tank. The crew didn't see him. All attention on navigation. He forced his legs to move, not a sprint. A stagger step that covered 8 feet in 2 seconds. Grabbed the track guard with both hands, pulled himself up. His arms did the work because his legs had nothing left, rolled onto the hull. The crew still hadn't detected him, engine noise and concentration masking his presence. Morrison crawled to the turret, found the commander's periscope. He had no rifle, no grenades, no weapons except his hands. He punched the periscope with his fist. The reinforced glass didn't shatter, but the impact made noise. The commander heard, saw Morrison's face pressed against the glass. Screamed. Morrison punched again. The glass cracked on the 4th hit. His knuckles split open. Blood on the glass. But the periscope was damaged, vision obscured. He moved to the driver's vision block. Same tactic. Punched until the glass cracked. His hands were bleeding now. Knuckles torn. But the driver's view was compromised. The 3rd tiger lurched to a stop, wedged between the oak trees. The commander opened his hatch 6 inches. Carbine barrel emerged. The commander trying to shoot Morrison off the tank. Morrison grabbed the barrel, yanked hard. The carbine pulled from the commander's hands, clattered off the tank into snow. The commander stared at Morrison through the partially open hatch. Young face, maybe 22, eyes wide with fear and confusion. He'd never seen anything like this. Never trained for an American soldier climbing his tank with bare hands and destroying vision blocks with his fists. Morrison leaned close to the hatch, spoke in English, knowing the commander wouldn't understand the words but would understand the meaning. "Get out or die in there, your choice." The commander understood. He shouted to his crew, "Panzer verlassen, aussteigen, schnell! Abandon tank, get out, fast!" 5 Germans evacuated, climbed from hatches and ran into the forest. Morrison didn't chase them. Couldn't chase them. He sat on the turret, hands bleeding, legs useless, watching them disappear into fog. The 3rd Tiger sat immobilized between oak trees. Abandoned, intact but disabled. The crew had chosen survival over duty. Morrison looked toward the 4th Tiger. It sat alone now, 150 yards away. The last one. Its commander had watched 3 Tigers destroyed or abandoned in 12 minutes. Watched one American soldier dismantle armored superiority through speed and geometry and absolute refusal to quit. The 4th Tiger's commander was Oberleutnant Hans Richter, 31 years old. Eastern Front veteran, 47 combat missions. 18 confirmed kills against Soviet armor. Smart, cautious, adaptive. And he'd just learned that his standard tactics meant nothing against an enemy who wouldn't follow standard rules. Richter's voice came over the radio to the surviving Tiger crews in the area. Einzelkämpfer-Taktik, sehr gefährlich, neue Methode erforderlich. Single combatant tactics, very dangerous, new method required. Morrison sat on the 3rd Tiger's turret, bleeding hands pressed against cold metal, watching the 4th tank begin to move. Not advancing, not retreating. Circling. Figure 8 pattern. Constant movement at 5 to 7 miles per hour. Never presenting a stationary target. Never maintaining predictable direction for more than 8 seconds. Smart tactics. Adaptive tactics. The kind that came from a commander who learned fast and thought faster. Morrison had no weapons, no grenades, no rifle, hands bleeding, legs destroyed, body running on nothing but willpower. And 1 Tiger remained between him and keeping 400 Americans alive. Oberleutnant Hans Richter kept his Tiger moving. Figure 8 pattern, continuous motion, speed varying between 5 and 7 miles per hour. Never predictable, never stationary. He'd watched Morrison destroy 3 tanks by exploiting the moment they slowed or stopped. Richter wouldn't give him that moment. Morrison sat on the abandoned 3rd Tiger, watching the 4th tank circle like a shark. His hands were bleeding, knuckles split open from punching through vision blocks. His legs were useless, muscles in complete failure. He had no rifle, no grenades, no weapons except his brain and his body was failing, but his brain still worked. Richter's movement pattern appeared random. Constant direction changes, unpredictable timing. But randomness had constraints. The Tiger couldn't move through dense tree clusters, couldn't traverse soft ground where it might bog down, had to stay on frozen, solid terrain. Morrison watched for 90 seconds, tracked the Tiger's movement, identified the pattern underneath the apparent chaos. 3 corridors, north-south. 30 yards long, frozen ground clear of obstacles. East-west, 25 yards, slight incline but navigable. Diagonal. 35 yards, threading between scattered pines. All 3 paths intersected at one point, a choke point between 2 massive boulders, 22 yards from Morrison's current position. The Tiger had to use one of those 3 paths. Terrain dictated it, and all 3 brought Richter within 25 yards of Morrison's position. Morrison slid off the 3rd Tiger. His legs buckled when he hit the ground. He crawled, hands and knees through snow, dragging useless legs behind him. 22 yards to the boulder, choke point. Took him 3 minutes to cover that distance. 3 minutes of crawling while Richter's Tiger circled and the machine gunner fired intermittent bursts into the forest, suppressive fire keeping any American reinforcements pinned down. Morrison reached the eastern boulder, positioned himself in the gap between the 2 massive stones. concealed from the Tiger's current position, waited. His breathing was ragged, heart hammering against his ribs, hands shaking from blood loss and exhaustion. But he forced his mind to stay clear, stay focused. This was still geometry, still angles and timing and understanding where the enemy had to be. Richter completed his current loop, had to choose the next path. Morrison watched through a gap in the rocks. The Tiger turned toward the north-south corridor, path A, coming directly toward the choke point. The tank approached at 6 miles per hour, 8.8 feet per second. Richter's periscopes scanned for threats. Looking for Morrison. Looking for American infantry with bazookas that didn't exist. The Tiger reached the boulder gap. Had to slow. 2 miles per hour to navigate the 14-foot gap without hitting stone. Richter focused on the navigation, driver calling out distances, commander watching clearances. Morrison waited until the Tiger was committed. Halfway through the gap, speed at 2 miles per hour. Then he moved. Not a sprint, a desperate lunge. He threw himself at the track assembly, grabbed metal with bloody hands. His arms did all the work, hauling his deadweight legs up onto the moving track. The effort nearly failed. His left hand slipped, blood making the metal slick. He caught himself with his right hand, pulled, rolled onto the hull. The crew didn't detect him. Engine noise masked the sound. Attention focused on navigation. Morrison crawled across the hull toward the turret, his legs dragged behind him, useless. Blood from his hands left red smears on grey steel. He reached the commander's cupola just as Richter cleared the boulder gap and began to accelerate. Morrison had no weapons. No grenades to drop through hatches. No rifle to blind periscopes. Only his hands. He grabbed the commander's periscope and wrenched it sideways with both hands. The periscope assembly cracked, shifted in its mounting. Morrison pulled harder. The periscope broke free, came off in his hands. Inside the Tiger, Richter suddenly had no forward vision. Ich kann nichts sehen. I cannot see. Morrison moved to the gunner's periscope. Same technique. Grabbed with both hands, ignored the pain in his split knuckles, wrenched until the assembly broke. The gunner's vision gone, Richter made his decision. Better to fight than to operate blind. He reached for the hatch lever, started to open it. Get out, see the threat. Kill it with his pistol. The hatch cracked open 3 inches. Morrison grabbed a loose piece of broken periscope assembly. Jagged metal, 6 inches long. Sharp edge where it had fractured. Not a grenade, but metal was metal. He jammed it into the hatch gap, wedged it in the mechanism. The hatch couldn't close now, couldn't open fully either. Stuck at 3 inches. Richter tried to force it. The hatch wouldn't budge. He drew his Luger, tried to aim through the 3-inch gap. Couldn't get the angle. Morrison was directly above the hatch. Richter couldn't depress the pistol enough to target him. Morrison had nothing left. No weapons, no strength, no tricks. But he had gravity. He positioned himself over the stuck hatch, braced his arms against the turret, lifted his useless legs, slammed his boots down onto the hatch with all his remaining strength. The impact jarred the wedged metal. The hatch shifted fractionally. Morrison slammed his boots down again. Again. Using his legs as hammers, the only way they were still useful. On the 4th impact, the wedged metal shifted enough. The hatch could move now. Richter shoved it open from below, came up with the Luger, searching for Morrison. Morrison didn't have a grenade to drop, didn't have a weapon to use. But he had the broken periscope assembly in his hand. 6 inches of jagged metal. He drove it down through the open hatch. Richter saw it coming, tried to dodge. The jagged metal caught him across the shoulder, tore through his uniform, cut deep. He screamed, dropped the Luger, fell back into the tank. Morrison reached through the hatch, grabbed the first thing his hands found. Ammunition crate, 88mm shells. He pulled it up, tipped it over. Shells tumbled through the hatch into the crew compartment. Heavy brass casings clanging on metal, rolling across the turret basket floor. The crew panicked. Ammunition loose in the crew compartment was a disaster. One spark, one hot surface, and it could detonate. The gunner shouted, "Munition! Munition!" The loader tried to grab the rolling shells. The driver, still blind without vision blocks, didn't know what was happening. The radio operator climbed toward his hatch, trying to evacuate. Morrison pulled himself away from the commander's hatch, rolled to the side of the turret. His vision was tunneling, darkness creeping in from the edges, blood loss and exhaustion catching up. He had maybe 30 seconds of consciousness left. The fourth Tiger veered left, driver trying to maneuver without vision. The tank crashed into a pine tree. The impact threw Morrison from the hull. He landed in snow 10 feet away. Couldn't move. Couldn't get up. Couldn't do anything except watch. The German crew evacuated. Richter first, shoulder bleeding. The gunner, the loader, the driver and radio operator. All 5 running from the disabled tank, disappearing into fog. The fourth Tiger sat smoking, engine idling, crew gone. Immobilized against the tree it had crashed into. Morrison lay in the snow. 4 Tigers, 18 minutes. All destroyed, abandoned, or disabled. His vision went black. When he came to, Sergeant Hayes was pulling him behind, the tree line. 2 medics working on his hands, wrapping bandages around split knuckles. Morrison tried to speak. His voice came out as a whisper. "The Tigers?" Hayes looked at him like he was insane. "All 4 stopped, kid." "You stopped all 4? Morrison closed his eyes. Did the math one more time. 4 Tigers destroyed meant Northern Sector held. Northern Sector held meant no breakthrough. No breakthrough meant 400 Americans lived. The math worked. "Good," Morrison whispered. "That's good." His legs had carried him through 4 sprints. His hands had torn apart vision blocks. His mind had calculated angles and distances and timing that kept him alive when he should have died a dozen times over. 5.2 seconds. 40 yards. State Championship 1,941. Track and field. It counted for something after all. Morrison passed out. And while he slept, 180 American soldiers held the northern perimeter of Bastogne. 4 Tiger tanks sat burning or abandoned within 200 yards of each other, and the German armor that was supposed to break through and end the siege never came. Because one private who ran track in high school had understood that sometimes the fastest weapon is the one that closes distance before the enemy can react. Morrison woke at 1,147 hours in a makeshift aid station 200 yards behind the line. A converted Belgian farmhouse, walls pockmarked with shrapnel, roof partially collapsed. 23 wounded men lay on the floor, wrapped in whatever blankets the medics could scavenge. Morrison was one of them. His hands were wrapped in gauze, stained red-brown. Both legs elevated on ammunition crates. A wool blanket covered him to the chest. He tried to sit up. Pain shot through every muscle. His body screamed in protest. "Stay down." Captain Robert Drummond stood over him, Easy Company commander. Face lined with exhaustion, 5 days of siege etched into the creases around his eyes. "You've got severe muscle trauma in both legs. Your hands are shredded. You're hypothermic. Medic says you're lucky to be alive." Morrison's voice came out as gravel. "The line? Holding. Northern sector's quiet. Germans haven't probed since your little track meet with their Tigers. How long was I out?" 2.5 hours. Drummond pulled up an ammunition crate, sat down. "I need to know what happened out there." "Start to finish," Morrison told him. "The observation pattern over 5 days. German doctrine separating armor and infantry in fog. Tiger gun depression, creating dead zones, sprint distance and timing. The geometry of it all." Drummond listened without interrupting. When Morrison finished, the captain sat silent for 30 seconds. Then, "You destroyed 4 Tiger tanks with a rifle and 2 grenades." "Yes, sir." "You disobeyed my direct order to fall back." "Yes, sir." "You engaged enemy armor without anti-tank weapons, without support, without authorization." "Yes, sir." Drummond stared at him. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "Morrison, you're either the bravest soldier I've ever commanded or the craziest. I haven't decided which. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. Didn't feel brave. Felt like math. The Tigers break through. 400 men die. I had the speed to stop them. The math said do it. Drummond shook his head slowly. The math said do it. Jesus Christ, Morrison. The math said you'd die. No, sir. The math said I might die. Different calculation. A runner appeared in the doorway. Private Chen, left leg bandaged from the earlier 88mm round. Captain, S2 wants you. They're photographing the Tigers. Drummond stood, looked at Morrison. You're getting a medal for this. Probably a court-martial too for disobeying orders. We'll see which comes first. He walked toward the door, paused. Morrison? Sir? That 5.2 seconds. State championship. I'm glad you ran track. Me too, sir. Over the next 6 hours, intelligence officers documented the scene. Captain Richard Warren, S2 intelligence officer for 506th PIR, arrived at 1,400 hours with camera and notebook. He photographed all 4 Tigers from multiple angles, counted bullet holes in vision blocks, examined grenade damage, documented crew casualties. First Tiger, complete loss, crew killed, internal grenade detonation. Second Tiger, complete loss, crew killed or captured, engine fire catastrophic. Third Tiger, abandoned intact, crew evacuated, recovered by American forces at 1,523 hours. Fourth Tiger, disabled, crew evacuated, mechanical damage from collision. Warren interviewed 14 American soldiers who'd observed the engagement. Their accounts matched. One soldier, Solo, had destroyed 4 German heavy tanks in 18 minutes using speed and improvisation. Warren's official report read, PFC Eugene Morrison utilized exceptional sprint capability to close distance with enemy armor before crews could respond. Exploited Tiger 1 design limitations, including 8-degree gun depression, limited vision when buttoned. Methodology required 3 factors: isolated armor, limited visibility conditions, and sub-6-second 40-yard sprint capability. Assessment: highly effective but not universally replicable due to physical requirements. The German reaction came through radio intercepts. At 1,215 hours, German regimental commander Oberst Friedrich Kaufmann transmitted orders to all units. Keine weiteren Panzerangriff auf Nordsektor bis Infanterieunterstützung gesichert ist. No further armor attacks on northern sector until infantry support is secured. The order meant something critical. The Germans had redirected their armor. Eastern sector became the focus. Southern approaches. Anywhere except the northern perimeter, where 1 American soldier had somehow destroyed 4 Tigers. The tactical impact was immediate and measurable. December 23rd through December 26th, the northern sector faced 0 major attacks, light probing by infantry only, no armor. The 180 men, holding that 800-yard line, were left relatively unmolested while German forces concentrated elsewhere. On December 26th, Patton's Third Army broke through from the south. The siege of Bastogne ended. The 101st Airborne had held for 8 days against 5-to-1 odds. Total casualties: 105 killed, 536 wounded. But the pocket never broke. The town never fell. Post-battle analysis would later estimate that if German armor had broken through the northern sector on December 23rd, American casualties would have increased by 300 to 400 additional killed or wounded. Morrison's action had prevented that breakthrough. But Morrison didn't think about casualties saved or strategic impact. When he regained consciousness at 1,147 hours, his first thought was simpler. Did the math work? Did the Tigers stop? The answer was yes. Between December 25th and January 15th, 7 other American soldiers attempted Morrison's tactics against German armor. The methodology spread through informal channels, soldiers talking to soldiers. No official doctrine, just whispered conversations. You hear about Morrison? Killed 4 Tigers by running at them. Private Leonard Martinez, 327th Glider Infantry. Attempted sprint assault on abandoned Panzer IV, December 28th. Successful climb, disabled vision blocks. Tank crew evacuated. Success. Private Daniel O'Brien, 501st PIR. Attempted assault on isolated Stug 3, January 3rd. Successful climb. Crew surrendered without fight. Success. Corporal Frank Russo, 502nd PIR. Attempted assault on Panther tank, January 7th. Sprint time, 7.2 seconds for 40 yards. Too slow. Machine gun killed him before he reached the tank. Failure, KIA. 4 more attempts followed through January. 2 successful, 2 failures. Success rate, 57% when conditions matched Morrison's scenario. Isolated armor, limited visibility, no infantry support. The 101st Airborne issued informal guidance on January 12. Not official doctrine, but recognized tactics. Identify soldiers capable of sub-6 second 40-yard sprint. Train them on Tiger vulnerabilities, gun depression angles, vision block locations, hatch positions. Designate as tank hunters for situations where armor operates without infantry support. The guidance was pragmatic. It acknowledged that Morrison's action wasn't magic or luck. It was physics, geometry, and speed applied correctly under specific conditions. Replicable if the soldier had the capability and the conditions aligned. German forces adapted too. Captured documents from February 1945 showed new directives. Maintain infantry escort at all times regardless of visibility. Tiger commanders received instructions to keep moving, avoid stationary positions. The German armor doctrine had changed in direct response to one American private's 18-minute assault. Morrison remained at the aid station for 3 days. His legs recovered slowly. Muscle damage was severe but not permanent. His hands healed faster, though the scars on his knuckles would remain for life. On January 8, 1945, General Anthony McAuliffe visited Morrison personally. The acting division commander who had sent the famous reply to German surrender demands now stood in front of the private who'd stopped 4 Tigers with track and field speed. "Morrison," McAuliffe said, "I'm recommending you for the Distinguished Service Cross." Morrison, sitting on his cot with bandaged hands, said, "Sir, I was just fast. You were smart, soldier. Fast is genetic. Smart is choice. You chose to stay when everyone else retreated. You chose to attack when doctrine said withdraw. You chose to think instead of panic. Seemed like the math, sir. The only math that worked." McAuliffe smiled. "The math. I'm putting that in the citation." The medal came through on February 3rd. Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism in action against enemy armor. Citation read, Private First Class Eugene Morrison, through exceptional courage and tactical innovation, single-handedly neutralized 4 enemy heavy tanks, preventing a breakthrough that would have resulted in catastrophic American casualties. Morrison kept the medal in his pocket. Never wore it. When other soldiers asked about it, he shrugged. "I ran track in high school. It helped." January 8, 1945. Morrison stood at attention in Bastogne shattered town square, while General Anthony McAuliffe pinned the Distinguished Service Cross to his uniform. 47 soldiers attended the ceremony. Temperature, 14 degrees. Snow falling light and steady. McAuliffe's citation was brief. Extraordinary heroism in action against enemy armored forces, December 23, 1944. Private First Class Eugene Morrison. Through exceptional courage and tactical innovation, single-handedly neutralized 4 enemy heavy tanks, preventing breakthrough that would have resulted in catastrophic American casualties. Morrison's response was briefer. "Thank you, sir. Just did what needed doing." Stars and Stripes requested interviews 3 times. Morrison refused all 3. He gave one statement to the Army newspaper. "I ran track in high school. State championship, 40-yard dash." Turns out that training helped in Belgium. That's all. The army wanted more. Human interest story. Hero narrative. Morrison wouldn't cooperate. He saw what he'd done as problem-solving, not heroism. 4 Tigers threatened the line. He had the speed to stop them. He stopped them. Simple mathematics applied under pressure. Combat record after Bastogne. Morrison remained with Easy Company through the final months of war. Operation Varsity, March 24, 1945, the Rhine crossing. He jumped with the 17th Airborne Division in the largest single-day airborne operation in history. Landed without injury. Fought through Germany. Was in Austria when VE Day came on May 8. Total combat days. 187. Confirmed kills. 13 tank crew, 4 infantry. Wounds. None from enemy fire. His only injuries came from punching through Tiger vision blocks with his bare hands. The scars on his knuckles never fully faded. Promoted to sergeant, April 1945. Discharged November 1945 at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. He took a train to Harrisburg, walked into his parents' house, hugged his mother, and said, "I'm home." She held him for 5 minutes without speaking. Then she asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. Legs work. Hands work. Everything works." She didn't ask about the war. Not then. Not ever. She'd read the letter from Captain Drummond explaining what Eugene had done at Bastogne. She'd folded that letter, put it in a drawer, never mentioned it. Some things mothers didn't need to hear their sons talk about. Morrison used the GI Bill. Penn State University, 1946 to 1950. Mechanical engineering major. He joined the track team his freshman year. The coach timed his 40-yard dash, 5.4 seconds, 0.2 slower than high school, but still competitive. The coach asked if Morrison had run track before. State champion, 1941. Pennsylvania. "Why'd you stop running?" "War. But I used it there too." The coach waited for elaboration. Morrison offered none. The coach didn't push. Morrison graduated 1950 with honors, joined Bethlehem Steel Corporation, same company his father had worked for 37 years. Structural Engineering Division. Bridge design. He spent his career calculating load-bearing capacities, stress factors, material tolerances. More geometry. More mathematics. The same skills that had kept him alive in Belgium now kept bridges standing in Pennsylvania. He married Helen Kowalski in 1951. They'd met at Penn State, chemistry class. 3 children followed. Susan, 1952. Margaret, 1954. Thomas, 1957. Morrison was a quiet father, present but reserved. He attended every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every track meet when Thomas joined the high school team. Thomas asked once, age 15, "Dad, did you really destroy 4 tanks?" Morrison was working in his garage, rebuilding a carburetor. He didn't look up. "Yes." "How?" "I ran fast." "That's it?" "I ran fast when it mattered. Rest was geometry." Thomas waited for more. Morrison returned to the carburetor. The conversation was over. Morrison rarely discussed Bastogne. He didn't attend 101st Airborne reunions until 1967, 22 years after the war. Helen convinced him to go. "The men you served with, they want to see you." At that reunion, 17 veterans from Easy Company surrounded Morrison within 10 minutes. They wanted to shake his hand, wanted to tell him they remembered, wanted to say thank you for December 23rd. Sergeant William Hayes, now 53 and running a hardware store in Ohio, grabbed Morrison's shoulders. "You saved us, Gene, all of us. Northern Sector holds. We all live. You did that." Morrison, uncomfortable with the attention, shrugged. "You would have held the line anyway." "Not against 4 Tigers, we wouldn't have." Morrison attended reunions after that, every 2 years. Not because he wanted attention, but because these men understood what December 23rd had cost. They understood the mathematics of it. The cold calculation that said one man might die to save 400. They understood because they'd made similar calculations themselves. In 1984, a local Harrisburg newspaper researched D-Day anniversary stories. A reporter found Morrison's Distinguished Service Cross in military records, called him for an interview. Morrison, age 59, reluctantly agreed. The article ran June 6, 1984. Local engineer was Bastogne Hero. His co-workers at Bethlehem Steel were shocked. Morrison had worked there 34 years. Nobody knew. He'd never mentioned Bastogne, never mentioned the DSC, never mentioned running at Tigers. One colleague asked, "Gene, why didn't you tell us? It was a long time ago, different life. This is the life that matters now." But the newspaper article changed things. The Army War College invited Morrison to speak in 1985. Topic: Unconventional Tactics in Armor Engagement. Morrison prepared a technical presentation. Geometry of gun depression angles, sprint mechanics and closing speeds. Physics of periscope destruction. The officers expected war stories. They got an engineering lecture, formulas on blackboards, diagrams of Tiger 1 specifications, calculations proving why sub-6-second sprint speed created tactical advantage against isolated armor in limited visibility. It was the most effective teaching on improvised anti-tank tactics ever delivered at the War College. Because Morrison stripped away heroism and presented raw problem-solving, the officers understood courage matters, but understanding the enemy's vulnerabilities matters more. Morrison's final recorded 40-yard sprint came in 1989, age 64. Penn State alumni track meet. His grandchildren, Jennifer and Michael, ages 9 and 7, were watching. Helen timed him with a stopwatch. 8.7 seconds. Jennifer asked, "Grandpa, why do you still run?" Morrison, breathing hard, hands on knees, looked at his granddaughter. "To remember when it mattered." Long time ago, Belgium, winter, I had to run fast to help people. Did it work? Yes, it worked. Morrison ran recreationally until age 68, jogging mostly, easy pace, 3 miles, 4 times a week. Not for speed anymore. For memory, for the feeling of legs working, muscles responding, body doing what mind commanded. He kept a journal, private. Helen found it after his death. One entry, dated December 23, 1994, the 50th anniversary, read, 50 years ago today, I ran faster than I ever had. Not to win a race, to stop tanks, 4 Tigers, 18 minutes. I've spent 50 years wondering why I didn't retreat when ordered. Still, don't have a good answer. I saw the problem. Knew the solution. Leaving made no sense, so I ran. Track and field, 1941. Who knew it would save 400 lives? I didn't. I just ran. That's all it was. That's all it ever was. Run fast when it matters. Morrison died March 15, 2003. Age 78. Heart failure. Sudden. He'd been working in his garage, rebuilding another carburetor, when his heart stopped. Helen found him 20 minutes later. Funeral at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 60. Family request. Morrison had never asked for military honors, but his children insisted. 47 attendees, family, veterans, Army representatives. Thomas delivered the eulogy. Dad ran fast when it mattered, lived slow when it counted. We were lucky to keep up with him. He never talked much about the war, never talked about the Tigers. When people called him a hero, he'd say he was just fast. But we knew, he wasn't just fast. He was smart enough to use that speed when 400 lives depended on it. That's not just heroism. That's love. Love for people he'd never met. Love for strangers who needed someone to stand between them and death. Dad stood. Dad ran. Dad saved them. We'll miss him. But 400 families got to keep their fathers and sons because ours ran 40 yards in December 1944. We're proud of him. We'll always be proud. The headstone is simple. Standard military issue. Eugene Morrison, Sergeant, U.S. Army, 101st Airborne Division. Bastogne, December 23, 1944. Below that, the family added one line, 5.2 seconds. The time that mattered. The time that changed everything. What Morrison proved on December 23, 1944, wasn't complicated. Speed defeats armor when applied correctly. Observation defeats doctrine when patterns are recognized. One soldier can change battle outcomes when mathematics supports the action. High school track matters in war when geometry aligns with courage. The numbers tell Morrison's story better than words. 4 Tigers destroyed. 18 minutes. 5.2 seconds, the sprint time that saved 400 lives. 40 yards the distance that changed everything. 100 American soldiers who came home because one private understood that running toward tanks made more sense than running away. Morrison never called himself a hero. He called himself a runner. On December 23, 1944, that was exactly what Bastogne needed. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't armor or artillery. Sometimes it's a private who ran track in high school, understood geometry better than generals understood tactics, and knew that 5.2 seconds could save 400 lives. Eugene Morrison never wanted fame. He wanted to run. On December 23, 1944, he ran toward 4 Tiger tanks when every instinct screamed to run away. He ran because the math said it was the only option. He ran because 400 men needed someone fast enough to close 40 yards before death arrived. He ran, and they lived. That's the whole story. If this moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe to keep these histories alive. Comment below. Where are you watching from? Tell us if you know someone who served at Bastogne. Share this story. Eugene Morrison never wanted fame, but he deserves remembrance. Thank you for watching. Thank you for making sure Eugene Morrison isn't forgotten. These men gave everything. The least we can do is remember their names.